Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with some of your statements that we've eroded public confidence and people are frustrated. And I wish there was a direct scientific way to determine why people come out to vote. Take the two last recent special elections we had. SD7, right? $7 million was spent and 25% of the voters show up. A small city council race down in Thousand Oaks, just a city council race, both on off election times, both on off, not normal election times, and 27% of the vote shows up there with less than $100,000 spent. So I wish there was some way to determine what's causing voters not to come out to vote. I do have a couple of questions on your bill, though, just because I'm curious about why I think voters are just disenfranchised. They feel like it doesn't matter. I think people that get elected by 8,000 votes versus people that get elected by 150,000 votes, there's not a correlation in the representation in that state. So I think it's that. But I do have a question because I am concerned about charter cities. Does your bill include charter cities? It doesn't specifically exclude it, and that's why I'm asking the question.
I think we mirrored it after how the Federal Voter Participation Act or the the federal legislation on voter rights is the Voting Rights Act is applied. So we want it to apply to all government agencies in the state that have elections. So it could be anybody. It could be any county, any city, any water district. Everyone. If somebody has an off-year election and it leads to lower voter turnout, I think the voters have a right to call the way they hold their elections into question.
So are you telling me that it does apply to charter cities?
We hope that it will.
So it's your intent to apply it to charter
cities?
Yes,
it is.
So it's against the Constitution. The California Constitution, does give charter cities the authority to make their own rulings regarding municipal affairs. So if a charter city decides to have an election or, I don't know, have a thing about a fee or whatever, it doesn't matter. A charter city under the Constitution is protected.
Protected in certain areas, not all areas.
But in the rights of their municipal affairs, it's definitely outlined and protected.
And not in this case. So
can you tell me why they're not constitutionally protected in this case?
The definition of a charter city is very clear in terms of when it participates.
And I would make another point because this came up a couple of months ago. This bill would not apply to a special election that needed to be called.
Right.
That's kind of the scenario that you played out. If someone needed to call an emergency question on the ballot, they would a locality or an entity that causes an election would still be able to do so under this bill, as with a couple of previous bills that were in the Assembly. Vice Chair, I don't know if you heard that, but
yeah, I did.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your wisdom. I appreciate that very much, but that's not the issue that I'm talking about. I'm just talking about charter cities having, under our California Constitution, the right to govern its own municipal affairs, to call an election, to call a meeting, to call, to increase taxes, decrease taxes, whatever the case may be. Charter cities are protected under our California Constitution to make rules concerning their own municipal affairs. And if this bill affects charter cities, I believe that it truly does violate the California Constitution, which I think takes 2/3 vote of the voters to change.
I was the council president and the council member of a charter city, and we got into the many instances in conflicts with the state on similar issues, and we investigated that very thoroughly, and also in preparing this bill. And all our research indicates that this bill is on the correct side of the law on that issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Mr. Gordon and Mr. Muller.
The Vice Chair asked my question.
All righty. Mr. Muller.
Oh, I'm glad I got to go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the intent on the bill. I do have some concerns. I have been all for seeking ways to increase voter participation, supported the elimination of some of those odd month elections, March, April, those kinds of things. But I supported that in light of the fact that it didn't touch the November elections. In my home county, San Mateo County, a number of jurisdictions are having elections this November. They hold elections in odd number of years. I think November is a generally recognized time when elections occur. You mentioned the voter fatigue, November. I think it actually, there's a recognition, at least, that November is a time when elections occur. So I have a concern just looking at my district and what the impact might be. As a matter of fact, I actually, as a council member in South San Francisco, contemplated moving to a general election cycle, did some research on that, appreciate some of Assemblymember Gatto's comments with regard to voter recognition on candidate platforms and so forth. I have a more specific concern. It has to do with the piece of legislation I moved, which is AB 2028, which is a pilot project on voting by mail. So we are, for the first time in San Mateo County, rolling this out countywide. We've got 30-plus jurisdictions in the process of signing on. We're going to have an all-vote-by-mail pilot project, which allows for 3 election dates between now and 2018 to have all vote-by-mail elections. But it's specific to elections that are not statewide. So if we were to have this pilot extended, say, if we can demonstrate the data that voter turnout increases, and that's the whole purpose of this pilot, is voter turnout, voter participation. If we can show the data which shows, minority participation is enhanced with voting by mail, those kinds of things, and wanted to extend that pilot, but we consolidated these election dates into only statewide elections. That would really prevent our pilot from being continued and having that sunset date eliminated. So this is a very county-specific concern that I have, but if there's any clarification,
just to respond to that, this bill wouldn't affect that. I'll explain why. If you are in an area or a region where people are used to voting every November and it doesn't result in a decrease in voter participation in off-year elections, nobody can challenge those jurisdictions. If there's a general culture in that area of voting on off-year elections, it doesn't kick in. This bill wouldn't actually kick in until 2022, and then they would have 4 years to prove. They would have to compile 4 years of data to prove that 4 elections, not 4 years, but 4 regularly held elections to prove that there's a decrease in voter participation in off-year elections. So, generally, if your bill is going to result in voter participation increase, that pretty much doesn't even trigger anybody to challenge the local jurisdiction with this bill, because you would have an increase. Where there's an increase, but remember the bill has a 25% reduction threshold. It's not even, we don't even say reduction. We say 25% reduction, which means that if voter participation regular years is 40%, it would have to go down to 15% on off-year elections for 4 years straight to trigger this bill.
So this 25% figure that you're citing, my understanding was, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm rifling through this material here, but my understanding was it's 25% turnout below gubernatorial or statewide turnout.
That's correct.
Okay, so if you had, say, 65% turnout, which I know is a high figure, but say you had 65% turnout in a gubernatorial cycle, and my home community of South San Francisco has 40% turnout in a municipal election. Mm-hmm. That's a trigger, right?
That's a trigger.
So, and in my
wouldn't you agree that there's something wrong there?
I have a concern about that, about low turnout, but
a 25% drop off from one year to the next on a consistent basis for 4 elections straight.
So you're not looking at numbers over time. You're saying turnout in my home community of South San Francisco would have to drop off by 25% from year to year? My understanding was it's 25% below the gubernatorial turnout or a statewide election turnout.
It really doesn't. What you are measuring against is the gubernatorial or presidential years. Those are pretty much the benchmark that you begin to measure from.
It's the last 4 statewide general elections. This is page 2, line 13 through 17. So that would include 2 presidentials and 2 gubernatorials.
Right. So, and I don't mean to belabor this, and I know this is not about my bill, it's about your bill. I just wanted to make the point, with our pilot situation, every single jurisdiction has to sign on. So every single jurisdiction has to participate. So if one of those jurisdictions falls below, my concern is that our pilot would be imperiled extending beyond 2018. So I appreciate the intent here.
I don't understand why. Your pilot lasts for how many years?
Through 2018, but we're hoping to get it extended
Which
beyond 2018.
my bill doesn't take effect until 2022. So it doesn't affect your pilot at all. In fact,
it doesn't affect
you're
the
not gonna
immediate
really
pilot. We're
begin-
trying to get it
when you
extended
begin your
beyond
calendar, to the matter.
2018.
You won't really begin to start to challenge this information maybe till 2022, really, when you start to compile four years of data. So, I mean, it's going to be way beyond your pilot and your bill and that issue. So, I mean, they really don't even come close together. I mean, this doesn't even come in and require anybody to do it unless the data is so strikingly egregious that somebody at a local level would want to challenge this. And that's what this bill is trying to do. It's trying to create a situation in which you're making it easier to people to weigh into decisions that affect their lives in a big way. And I just hope that you see the wisdom in that and support our bill today. Thank you.
Additional questions of the committee? This enjoys a due pass recommendation. It's been moved and seconded. You may close if you would like.
Respectfully ask your support today. Thank you.
All righty. Secretary, call the roll.
The motion is due pass. Ridley Thomas?
Aye.
Ridley Thomas, aye. Grove? No. Grove, no. Travis Allen? Gatto? Aye. Gatto, aye. Gordon? Aye. Gordon, aye. Mullen? Not voting. Mullen, not voting. Perea? Aye. Perea, aye. We have ayes 4, noes 1.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much.
Senator Hill, SB 21, and you're pitch hitting for the gentleman from San Diego.
That's correct, Mr. Chair, if I could.
When you're ready.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Good morning. SB 21 increases transparency within the Political Reform Act by requiring nonprofits.
We're going to, I think that the Vice Chair would like to know that you have amendments that you'll be working on.
Yes, and I wanted to mention that at the conclusion of my statement. We, due to conversations with the chair and your tremendous staff and consultants, so thank you for that. We're looking at trying to kind of distinguish between those nonprofits that are that I look at maybe taking advantage of the system versus those professional nonprofits, the League of California Cities, others, the Association of Legislators, to try and distinguish between the two so that we can be fair and make sure that we gets what we're looking for, and I think what the committee's looking for as well. So we're going to be continuing that conversation with this committee, and thank you for that.
Yes.
Respectfully ask for an aye vote, members.
All righty. Witnesses in support?
Nicholas Heidorn with California Common Cause. We strongly support this bill. We think it brings absolutely needed transparency to the travel gifts, how travel gifts are done, particularly within the nonprofit gift area. This bill would enable it so that we can see who's actually funding this travel, which we think is necessary for the PRA to function as intended. We ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Additional witnesses?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I'm Trudy Schaefer, representing the League of Women Voters of California. We also support the bill and ask for your aye vote. This really comes down to transparency and letting the public understand how the money is flowing. And we do believe that it will bolster the public's trust and the feeling that they know that they can have less of a perception of undue influence and corruption and more faith in the honesty of their elected officials. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional witnesses in support.
Jason Feifel on behalf of California Public Interest Research Group here. Apologies for not getting our letter in on time, but we are in support of this bill as well.
Apology accepted. Additional witnesses.
Nikki Moore for the California Newspaper Publishers Association in support.
Thank you. Witnesses, additional witnesses in support, witnesses in opposition. Questions of the committee. Mr. Pereira.
Yeah, just a quick question in regards to the amendments, and it sounds like the amendments are seeking to define which nonprofits are required to disclose,
or more clearly, which nonprofits are required will not have to disclose. Yeah.
And one of the examples was the League of Cities. Mm-hmm. I wonder why we would exclude the League of Cities, considering that they have they have lobbyists, they have a whole lobbying team, they're constantly lobbying us. Why wouldn't we want to include a group like the League of Cities who does have political interest in the decisions that we make?
Well, I think the goal of working with the committee and the chair is to try and define what the distinction is between the two, and then see if there is the lobbying and it's felt that should be represented in some type of disclosure, then I think that needs to be called out in some way and included if it's the same. So then that's why the bill has kind of moved in the manner that it has, because we felt that there is a consistency in lobbying and interest groups that influence all of us, and even at the local level, that having that known. So we're going to carefully look at that and see that if we can come to some resolution in it. So I appreciate that concern and very accurate.
And we will make sure that members of the committee are aware. We don't have them in print today. The author and I had a series of dialogues over the last couple of days. And he has agreed to continue to work with us. So you have the agreement of your chair, members of this committee, to be fully informed as we deliberate about.
And if I could also, Mr. Chair, some of it is also related to maybe doing a dollar threshold that would make it work a little better and fit within it. So we're going to try and come up with a solution to that. So thank you,
Vice Chair.
My colleague from Fresno asked my question.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, additional questions? We are going to give this a due pass recommendation. We thank you for your being willing, and we understand, I think, a sense of what you're attempting to get at. This would affect all manner of nonprofits and elected officials in the state of California, including our constitutional officers who are part of their professional trade associations that happen to be organized as nonprofits, the Insurance Commissioners Association, and the like. So we will attempt to come up with smart and thoughtful amendments that seek to further your goals of transparency, and we thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you.
Have we moved and seconded the bill? Yes, the Vice Chair and Mr. Gordon have moved and seconded. Secretary, call the roll.
The motion is due pass to Committee on Appropriations. Ridley Thomas.
Aye.
Ridley Thomas, aye. Grove. Grove, aye. Travis Allen. Gatto. Aye. Gatto, aye. Gordon. Aye. Gordon, aye. Mullen. Aye. Mullen, aye. Perea. Aye. Perea, aye. Aye 6, no 0.
The bill is out. Aye 6, no 0. You're presenting 589 for Senator Block. Thank you for doing so. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. SB 589 allows disabled individuals under conservatorships to register to vote if, with reasonable accommodation, they can communicate their desire to participate in the voting process. Under current law, adults with developmental disabilities under conservatorships are routinely disenfranchised at alarming levels. A review of 61 conservatorship cases involving adults with developmental disabilities in Los Angeles County found that close to 90% of conservatees in those cases were disqualified from voting. SB 589 will create a presumption that a person has the right to vote regardless of conservatorship status. Protect a conservatee's right to vote unless it is shown by clear and convincing evidence that he or she cannot communicate a desire to participate in the voting process with or without reasonable accommodations. And finally, it will align California law with federal law by stating that people with disabilities are entitled to reasonable accommodations while registering to vote. There's been no opposition known, and here with me today is Raul Macias of the ACLU, to testify in support and answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Senator. Additional witnesses in support.
Members of the committee, Raul Macias on behalf of ACLU of California. The ACLU of California is pleased to sponsor SB 589, and we're committed to protecting and expanding our right to vote. We are also committed to ensuring that people with disabilities are free of discrimination and are valued and integrated members of society. And SB 589 would further both of these priorities by ensuring that people under conservatorship aren't stripped of their right to vote without being afforded due process. The U.S. has a long history of practices that prevent people with intellectual or mental health disabilities from participating in the political process by making assumptions about their capabilities. In 2007, in an effort to enhance access to voting and prevent the arbitrary loss of the right to vote, the American Bar Association adopted a series of recommendations for defining and assessing capacity to vote. SB 589 would codify several of these recommendations, including a presumption of the right to vote regardless of conservatorship status, basing the assessment of a person's capability to vote on their ability to communicate a desire to participate in the voting process, and adopting a clear and convincing evidence standard. California's lack of clear standards has had a real...
The Vice Chair moves and I second.
Okay, thank you. And we your I vote. Well, we just that we think that aligning California standards with the ABA recommendations will provide important protections. And so
Thank you very much for your testimony. Additional witnesses in support.
Greg DeGier, representing the ARC and United Cerebral Palsy California Collaboration, a coalition appeal with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families, friends, and service providers. When Tom Coleman from the Disability and Abuse Project in LA attended a meeting that the LA County Superior Court had for attorneys who represent people with developmental disabilities in these conservatorship cases. The idea of them being allowed to vote came up, and this was subject to laughter by the attorneys who supposedly are representing these people. It's shameful, and this bill gets at that, and we certainly support it.
Thank you. Additional witness.
Daniel Savino, Association of Regional Center Agencies, also very strongly in support. This really speaks to a civil rights issue. Whether or not you're under a conservatorship doesn't speak to your ability to vote or your interest in it, and allowing a reasonable accommodation for you to express that and sign the affidavit and such like, eminently reasonable. It's fundamentally a civil rights issue, and very much in support.
Thank you. Additional witnesses?
James Schwab on behalf of Secretary of State Alex Padilla in support.
Jill Levine, representing the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials, support.
Thank you. Trudy Schaefer, representing the League of Women Voters of California, also in support.
Nicholas Heidorn with California Common Cause, also in support.
Witnesses in opposition? Questions of the committee? Ms. Grove?
First of all, thank the author for bringing this forward. With working with the disability community, it was in meeting with them out on the lawn, especially when they were locked out of this building and not allowed to come in, and there were CHP officers blocking the door because they considered them a credible threat, which was just absurd to me, because they were voicing their objection about being cut out of the budget. I made this simple statement about, vote, and the lady who runs the organization that mainly brings the disabled community up here, who are very opinionated in what they want if you spend time with them. She said they can't vote. Most of them in conservatorship are not allowed to vote. That vote is stripped from them. So I do applaud the author for bringing this forward. I do want to make sure that there are safeguards to protect their right and who they choose to vote for, regardless of who it is. I would hate for somebody to request their vote to be made for a particular person or party or whatever, and then that be circumvented by the caregiver. So I would really want to make sure that there's some type of safeguard. I trust the disabilities, the ARC community, all those organizations to make sure that that right is protected. So I thank the author for bringing it forward.
I will pass that on, Joe. Thank you.
Additional questions of the committee? The bill has been moved and seconded.
Just on behalf of Senator Block, respectfully ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary, call the roll.
The motion is due pass to Judiciary Committee. Ridley Thomas?
Aye.
Ridley Thomas, aye. Grove? Aye. Grove, aye. Travis Allen? Gatto? Aye. Gatto, aye. Gordon? Aye. Gordon, I. Mullen. Mullen, I. Perea. Perea, I. We have ayes 6, no 0.
The bill is out. Thank you, Senator.
Chair, thank you, members.
I'm going to pass the gavel to the Vice Chair. Senator Pavley. Oh. The one and only Senator Pavley. You have SB 365, aptly named. Thank you, Senator, for joining us.
Thank you very much. I was reflecting back in the audience that I've served with 2 of your fathers. I'm not sure what that
longevity
exactly
has its wonderful privileges.
Mr. Mullen's father, sort of deja vu, huh?
All over again.
All over again. Yes, this particular bill will make it more convenient and help increase voter turnout. So I'm carrying it. In 2014, 61% of the voters voted by mail. You can vote by mail by obviously mailing your ballot back, putting a stamp on it if required, and put it back in the mailbox. You can drop them off at your local polls or precinct. But another option that several counties are using successfully and with security measures in place, etc., are in Sacramento and I think one in Santa Cruz County. So what this does is clarifies and puts into statute but that counties are allowed to provide drop-off locations for vote-by-mail ballots. But what it also does is, working collaboratively with the Secretary of State's office, who's supporting this measure, they will be given about a year till January 2017 to put into place the best management practices to assure that voter boxes are labeled correctly, visible, people would know what they're for, security regulations in place, and that would be distributed so we have more of a uniform standard for the counties that want to participate in this. So the logical places these might be secured in would be like a city hall or a library or places like that. But this bill was amended to allow the Secretary of State a thoughtful time for a year to come up with these uniform suggested guidelines for counties who wish to allow this option for voters to put it in place. So that's the gist of the bill. And with me, I have Kim Alexander, president of the California Voter Foundation, to testify in support.
And I think Mr. Mullen moves, and I'll second. Ms. Alexander?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I'm Kim Alexander with the California Voter Foundation. This bill is one of the recommendations that came out of our report last year studying 3 counties' vote-by-mail systems, and some of our other findings are included in your bill analysis prepared by the committee. We are finding that voters do increasingly want to vote by mail, and they also increasingly want to return those ballots in person, whether it's at a drop location or at a polling place. It saves time. It avoids having to wait for the U.S. Post Office to transfer that ballot, which we know can take longer and longer now as there's been reduction in postal facilities over the years. So we see this as giving voters a new option. We were really surprised to find when we did our study that there was actually no provision in California statute that allows for drop locations. And so this would actually give counties who may be uncertain whether they have the right to provide this convenience to voters the clear statutory permission to do so. So we want to see it put into statute, and we also want to make sure that the counties are given guidance about what the best practices are for chain of custody, identification, and other security provisions, how frequently the ballots are collected, so that voters can have confidence that their ballots will be cared for properly. So we hope that you will vote in favor of this bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Additional witnesses in support.
James Schwab on behalf of Secretary of State Alex Padilla. For all the reasons previously stated, the Secretary supports SB 365. And also to note that, while there's a rise in the use of vote by mail, there's also a rise in voters just dropping off their ballot close to Election Day. And so we see benefit in this and creating guidelines and security measures for the increasing trend of voter behavior and increasing use of these drop boxes. That's where I vote.
Thank you. Additional witnesses?
Mr. Chair and members, I'm Trudy Schaefer, representing the League of Women Voters of California, and we support this bill as a tool for increasing and encouraging voter participation.
Thank you. Sir?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members. Michael Bolden on behalf of the Service Employees International Union in support.
Thank you. No additional witnesses in support, witnesses in opposition. Questions of the committee? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of things are discussed in this committee about disenfranchising voters and making sure that voters aren't disenfranchised. And so I have a real concern about the bill. I know that we passed a bill last year allowing ballots to be dropped off or received 3 days after the election day, which is Friday, which I think solves a huge portion of this problem. But I think about the disenfranchisement of voters. I think about if one person goes down and to the polling place, or one person mails their vote by mail ballot and they vote and they're a registered voter, and then that's offset by potential fraud being dropped off at just random boxes in libraries or city halls, unsecure, whatever, because there's no establishment of guidelines or anything about security. I think that disenfranchises that true and correct voter. And I think that's why we have a huge issue of voter turnout, because I think people think that their real vote doesn't count. Senator Lou Correa recently ran for a supervisorial seat, and in one of his statements that he made publicly, he says, "My campaign continues to receive allegations that completed vote-by-mail ballots are being collected in bulk by campaign representatives and community organizations, sometimes even in exchange for cash payments." He went on to say that we must be more vigilant in making sure that the laws are not violated. So I think that as we extend and try to get people to participate in the voting process, we have to balance that with integrity of the vote to make sure that the person who is under the Voter Right Act eligible to vote has their vote not be disenfranchised. So with all due respect, I have to oppose your bill today.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Additional questions of the committee? Bill's been moved and seconded. Would you like to close, Senator?
Just that I don't disagree with a lot of what Ms. Grove said, but I want to assure everyone here that the purpose of sort of taking a time out for a year for the Secretary of State to come up with the recommended guidelines, again, the option for the counties, but proper labeling, box security, how many times you pick up, and in a place that is generally secure and available in large numbers to the public. I think it would make it, some people would actually feel more secure, perhaps, than taking the chances with the mail. Ask for your I vote.
God, I think the Vice Chair has an addendum.
Just based on your comment that you just made, Senator, I apologize, but you...
And this is the closing remark.
Based on the comment that you just made, about the Secretary of State taking off a year writing these regulations, there's nothing in your bill that says the counties have to follow it. It says they can if they want to. It's permissive. It's not a mandate. So even if he comes up with all these rules that says you have to have an armed guard or whatever guarding the ballot box, or whatever his guideline is, the counties don't have to follow it. So that was a concern since you. Sorry.
I'm going to keep with my close. For
Thank
the
you.
stairs.
For
the chairs stare at me.
Right. The bill's been moved and seconded. And Secretary, call the roll.
The motion is to pass to Committee on Appropriations. Ridley Thomas?
Aye.
Ridley Thomas, aye. Grove? No. Grove, no. Travis Allen? Gatto? Aye. Gatto, aye. Gordon? Aye. Gordon, aye. Mullen? Aye. Mullen, aye. Perea? Perea, aye. Ayes, 1, 2. 5, noes, 1.
5 ayes?
Ayes, 5.
Yeah, ayes 5. The bill is out. Thank you, Senator.
I'm not sure what that means. We'll take it. We can have a president's solution.
Thank you, colleagues, for your courtesy. I present AJR 13, which is acknowledgement of the 50th anniversary of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. We respectfully request an aye vote on this measure that has had bipartisan support over the last 50 years and is the the model for our own California Voting Rights Act. With that, I would respectfully request an aye vote, and if the chairs or vice chairs comfortable with it, let that be my close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Witnesses in support.
James Schwab on behalf of Secretary of State Alex Padilla in support.
Raul Macias on behalf of ACLU of California in support.
Jill Levine on behalf of the California Association of Clerk and Election Officials support.
Witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, bring it back to the committee. Any comments? I have one, of course. I have a great relationship with the chair. I really do. I feel like I do. I have a great relationship, and I value your integrity and your truthfulness. And to my knowledge, you've never lied to me. You've been to my district. I appreciate that for understanding what we do in Kern County. I do have one question on your resolution because I think it does question, I can't say your integrity, but it does question my opinion of what you meant to say, and maybe you didn't mean to say it like that. It says in the resolution that whereas on 2013 the Supreme Court struck down key sections of the Voting Rights Act that were designated to prevent discriminatory policies that can disenfranchise minority voters. Number one, that should never take place. We should never disenfranchise anyone from voting. But actually what happened in 1965 is there was one section after that was in 2013. It was actually just one section. It was section Part B, and it was just the formula section. So there weren't key sections. It was just that one formula section that was struck or changed by the court. When you look at Shelby County versus Holder, and you looked at the congressional study, it found that African American voters, and it states in that, and I can cite all the sources, where it says that out of the offending states, which in the South, these offending states that were disenfranchising minority voters, out of 6 of them, 5 of them had higher minority turnouts in voting than the white or Caucasian vote, and one of them was less than 0.5% less. So it broke my heart to watch the movie Selma. It breaks my heart to think that our nation ever did anything like that. But I think that the correction that has been made, we have a black president, several high-ranking officers in elected office. So I think the country truly has changed, even though we do have issues that still need to be addressed. But as far as all the statistical data that I have, I think the one provision in the resolution is incorrect, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention because I don't think it's correct.
Would you like me to respond?
Sure.
To the point of there are 2 provisions, pre-clearance and then the formula. The Supreme Court asked the Congress of the United States to come up with a new formula, and the Congress has yet decided to take action. We think that that is a very important part of the Voting Rights Act, and it is in effect neutered in some respects because the formula is not there, whether it be the use of racially polarized voting studies or the like, and it's fine to modernize the system as well. The second the second provision with respect to pre-clearance is also of great concern because there are jurisdictions in this state, not just at the legislative and congressional level, but at the local level, that were subject to pre-clearance over the life of this Voting Rights Act. Some earlier in its tenure, some roughly 20 years ago, and some as recently as 15 to 17 years ago. In Los Angeles County, there was a supervisorial district, the county supervisorial district, drawn via a Voting Rights Act lawsuit in 1991. And currently there are essentially 2 districts on the 5-member Board of Supervisors that are protected via the Voting Rights Act, the California and the Federal Voting Rights Act. As the Act stands today, there's a significant question about whether or not those districts would be protected as they are now, or if they would be formulated in the same way, to give individuals an opportunity to elect a representative of their choosing. It is not prescriptive. It doesn't. The goal is not to say if you are black, if you are Latino, if you are Asian, that you elect an African American, Latino individual, or an Asian American, but that if you are clustered or you live in such density that you have the opportunity to elect a representative of your choosing, and that the electoral system and the drawing of boundaries is not such that you are disenfranchised or not given the full opportunity to express your votes. With respect to the southern states that were under pre-clearance, that no longer have to go through that process, at least on an interim basis, unless there's a congressional solution, there have been several that have enacted various restrictive voting acts that previously were able to be either massaged or negotiated with the federal government. Some don't believe that's appropriate. I have a difference of opinion because if not for the federal government's watch, there would be fewer people voting in those jurisdictions. And over the 50 years, some things have changed. Sometimes there have been enlightened representatives who wanted to enfranchise the vote of various political persuasions. But the trend has been, unfortunately, and it comes back today, that there's been more of a suppressive effort than an empowerment effort. And the federal government's use of the Voting Rights Act has seemed to be an empowering agent, I forget my mispronunciation, for voters to engage in the electoral process and produce a representative of their choosing. So that's why it's a plural, because there are multiple parts of it. We respectfully disagree with the Supreme Court on their action with this measure, and this resolution is simply an attempt to bring to the fore for this legislature to opine on the merits of the bill, the merits of the Voting Rights Act, the Federal Voting Rights Act, its history, and when it comes to the floor, I want to read all of the whereases because I think it's important. And you know that I went to Selma this year. It was a part of the 50th anniversary celebration, and the Connie Kirkson elected officials and it's another organization, for some reason it eludes me, that were partners with ours in screening the movie Selma. We want to highlight that. We want to bring it to the fore. We think it can raise consciousness about civic engagement, the right to protest and advocate for change. And we think that this is a unique way to do so with the resolution. I don't carry many resolutions myself, but I thought that this was important, particularly as I chair the Elections Committee, and we would respectfully request your support here. There are any number of issues that ones can take issue with resolutions, but we think that the overall work product here is solid, sound, accurate, and worthy of the committee support.
I thank you very much, and I do applaud the author for bringing this forward. And I do know that there were serious issues in the past, and that we may face some now. But I was concerned about part of the language in there, the issue of barriers, that kind of stuff, with the overwhelming voting population. But I do applaud the chair for bringing it forward, and I am supporting the bill. I just wanted that clarified, or the resolution. So thank you.
Thank you.
Clerk will call the roll, or do you want to close? I'm sorry.
I'll take that as my close.
The motion is be adopted. Ridley Thomas?
Aye.
Ridley Thomas, aye. Grove? Aye. Grove, aye. Travis Allen? Gatto? Aye. Gatto, aye. Gordon? Aye. Gordon, aye. Mullen? Aye. Mullen, aye. Perea?
I have to go to another committee.
Perea, aye. We have ayes, 6 noes, 0.
This afternoon.
Mr. Mullen, before you leave, would you like to add on for the consent calendar?